What's up, everybody? Excited to be back on the grass with the guys. I was pleasantly pleased with our first week of practices and the retention that our players had. It's been exciting to obviously rev up the competition a little bit more, the physicality, but the energy in practice has been great, and looking forward to today. So with that, I'll take any questions.
Have you guys, I don't know if it's you or somebody on the analytics, done a study that, do you think these teams are just not going to want to give the ball to the 30-yard line? You know what I mean? Like, is there a major difference in the offense getting it at the 30 versus 25, and that's going to be a deterrent to them? Or do you think, look, we're going to have a lot of returns because they're just not going to want to give it to us on the 30?
Yes, so there's always been studies based off of expected points where you get the ball at, field position. With special teams, it's undeniable that it is the game of field position. Where you position the offense, where you position the defense, directly correlates to whether you can prevent somebody from coming out with points, or when it's your team, score points. So there are obviously yard line studies based off of expected points and everything. With this new kickoff rule and kickoff return rule, I think ultimately the strategy comes into play once we actually practice it in a game, to know what you're actually succeeding when you kick a touchback, how that feels. Let's say your offense does get a first down, but then has to punt. What does that feel like to the opponent? What does that feel like to you? That's where this game is going to be very, very revealing. The first preseason game and the game tonight, obviously.
At the same time, teams are probably going to hold back their real stuff in some ways too, right? To try to surprise people in the regular season, right?
In a sense, I think everybody has this notion that you can do so much with this kickoff return scheme, and you're drawing up, for example, I've drawn up 50 returns. Now, does that mean that I'll be able to have all 50 come into action? I don't believe so. I think ultimately the foundational piece of your kickoff return scheme has to start simple. I think a lot of people will be simple to start in preseason, and that'll ultimately tell you, how obviously complex you can get with your scheme in a few games.
Has there ever been a situation where you've gone into coaching in a specific scheme where you just really are uncertain as to how it's going to look going up against somebody else and in a live situation?
Uncertain, maybe not. I think when you have an open mind based off of just understanding that this game is ever evolving, and regardless of what the rules are in play, your personnel, you always have to have an open mind to change your scheme, to change how you teach things, and just be ready to understand that that's this game. It is changing, and it's our jobs as coaches to ultimately figure out, what we could use, what we could discard, and just go from there.
How much time has gone into, from your perspective, the install going all the way back to the spring? Like, did you break down like different segments and teach it? You almost have to teach it over, right, from scratch, because you want to kind of get the ideas out of guys' heads of how it used to be versus what it's going to be. Is that fair, or what you started with?
No, yes, that is fair. I think whenever there's a drastic rule change, you have to first start off with what are the biggest differences. You start there, and then you go into the rule restrictions that are now in play. And then you teach basically what's synonymous, like what are the similarities of what we did in the past and what we're doing now. Like I've said before, I think, what we do in special teams is the purest form of football. How you meet and defeat blocks, how you get off blocks, how you get the ball, all things that we've done, from special teams from day one. But I think you kind of mix what the rule restrictions are with that, and then you combine what your best scheme is.
Where are your players right now, the ones who need to know this rule and how it's implemented and what it means? Where are they right now in the learning of it?
So I think they're in a really good spot because, one of our meetings is dedicated to explaining what are the rules and what are the certain things that could come from that rule. And we focus on one, and then the walkthroughs are really a slower tempo pace of this is what we're trying to get accomplished on kickoff, return, and kickoff. And then you get into practice and they get speeded up a little bit more, and then you get in the film room and you watch the mistakes, you clean it up, and then you see them take the coaching points and fix it. And I think when you do that, like, you gain confidence as a coach that your players know what they're doing. The best part about this thing is this game tonight. You know, we're going to watch it as a group, and it's going to be very telling to our guys. Certain things that maybe we were teaching that we need to evolve, or certain things that we're convicted about right now. Like, yes, this is the right frame of mind to have moving forward with it. So I think we're in a great spot.
Scale of 1 to 10, how much of a change is this for players where you do have to work the kinks out truly on the practice field during training camp, that kind of thing?
1 to 10. I mean, I would say a 7.
Okay.
You know, I think with everything this new rule provides, it is a challenge. It's a challenge to coaches, it's a challenge to players. But you know, these players are resilient. They are, and they truly are pressing themselves to give feedback just as much as take coaching points. And with that, I think you ultimately accelerate the learning process because it's twofold. If I just told these players exactly what I want from them and didn't hear what they were saying, then how foolish of me to do that. You know, it's not necessarily, I don't cross that white line. So I think there's balance with it too. But to say to say that it's a 7 doesn't mean that it could, the learning process could accelerate pretty quickly.
Apologies.
No, all good.
What do you think of Miles Boykin as a gunner and what he could give you as a veteran on special teams?
Yes, a proven guy in this league, a true pro. You know, our young guys certainly look at him as a guy that's going to give the example in the right way. He's a guy that is the tone setter. When we get into drills, he wants to be the first person to take the rep because he's done it. And then when you can back up his practice tape with game tape, I think it speaks volumes for the younger players to be like, oh, this guy has made a living playing on special teams. And we have, you know, Miles Boykin has been great in terms of that leadership role, but there's other guys on the roster that also own that role as well. You have a guy like Matt Adams from the interior corps that has done that at a high level. You have a guy like Manhertz, who truly owns whatever role he has, and guys look at those veteran guys and like, okay, that's how it's done. That's how you prepare. That's how you take this serious. And I think we have some really good leadership guys across all our units on special teams.
Has there been any conversation with any of the players about wearing the Guardian caps, especially on that kickoff? Because I know that was one of the things they're able to do this year for the first time in games.
I certainly haven't had any conversations with guys, so I can't necessarily speak to, you know, where their mindset is with that, to be honest.
When you guys do special teams periods, you don't do a lot of 11 on 11. It's kind of like segmented. Just kind of curious, like what your thought process is and how that comes together.
I've always felt that fundamentals and technique win you games, and it has to start there. And until you create muscle memory where guys are doing it over and over and over again to where it's unconscious competence, they're not necessarily thinking about what they're doing, they're just doing it. I think that is the forefront of everything we do. The scheme comes to life based off of the fundamentals and technique. And when they do that, I ultimately will end up getting into a little bit more 11 on 11. But I think you can certainly break out every unit. Doesn't matter what it is. Doesn't matter whether it's new or old. I think you can break out every unit into smaller segments, build from there. And then when you start to piece it all together, it's very easy to, because you're like, this is how we did it in this technique, and this is where it applies.
I would imagine when you're looking at your core, trying to develop your core, you mentioned those experienced guys, you know what they've put on tape. When you have young guys like Bryce Ford Wheaton and Javarius Owens are two guys that seem like in your drills they've kind of, you know, sparked a little bit. How do you judge those younger guys and bring them along as quickly as possible to know that, you know, guys may not have that experience, but you might be able to count on them in situations?
Well, I think in the case of both Bryce Ford Wheaton and Javarius Owens, those are two guys that are naturally they're really good athletes, which will help accelerate their learning process even with the limited reps that they've had in this league. But that being said, you know, those are two guys that have made it important to themselves and to this organization to come up and meet with me individually and ask, hey, when you're saying this, what do you mean by this? Could you make me a cut up on this? Because they want to be the best versions of themselves. And it doesn't matter whether they're a first-year player, a second-year player, a third-year player. Those are just two examples of guys that, you know, experience matters, but in their minds, it's like, I could do it too. You know, and I love that mindset. It's a true gritty, dog mindset that I respect, and I see those two guys having success in the preseason.